Akshaya's webinar on how to win the recruitment battle with the technology sword, which is in partnership with Kelly OCG. I'm Akshaya from People Matters, and before speaking about today's agenda, let me give you a snippet of the topic. According to a recent survey, 70% of organizations today have adopted technology in the space of talent acquisition, a rise of 7% from last year. As organizations digitize their ways to hire the best in the market, more and more innovative startups and vendors are tapping this market potential with best-in-class, highly specialized solutions. Using these products strategically, forward-looking organizations are no longer using a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather combine different technology and tools to recruit their specific target groups. In this webinar, we will explore how the HR technology landscape has evolved over the last years, role of specialized recruitment tools in improving talent acquisition, how smart technology can support a recruitment analytics strategy, sharing best practices approach adopted by global companies in combining different recruiting technologies. Let me now introduce you the speaker for this webinar. We have the privilege of having with us Tim Prohm, Senior Director at the Global Center of Excellence for Recruitment Process Outsourcing, Kelly OCG. With more than 15 years of practical experience in design and implementation of complex HR outsourcing solutions and innovative HR technologies, he today drives strategic innovation and digital initiatives for Kelly OCG in Europe. Tim served as advisor to several international HR technology startups and has an excellent overview on the latest trends and market developments in this area. Before joining Kelly OCG, Tim served as an HR strategy consultant and as the managing director of a multinational recruitment process outsourcing service provider. Our partner for today's webinar is Kelly OCG. Kelly Outsourcing and Consulting Group is a leading provider of global talent management solutions. They consult with the world's top organizations to architect innovative and customized workforce strategies that allow our clients to achieve their strategic goals and bottom-line profitability. Their solutions include recruitment process outsourcing, managed service provider, and talent supply chain management services. We have a very, very interesting agenda for the webinar today. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the webinar microphone to Tim. Over to you, Tim.
Perfect. Akshaya, thank you so much for the kind introduction and the kind word, and I hope you can hear me loud and clear. And yeah, exactly what was already announced. So I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to talk about technology in the recruiting space today. Just to give you a short overview on who I am, I was introduced, but my focus today, as in my role with Kelly, is I focus on strategy, technology, and innovation. And technology, as you all will know, is a very, very important topic nowadays in talent acquisition, because where in former times people would just come up to your company and apply or write a written application, now everything is technology, and that's not only in the business world, that's also happening in the private world. So this is a common topic. So if you want to connect with me on Twitter, follow me. I would really appreciate that. If you have any further questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out. You see my email address on the bottom of the page. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I appreciate that as well. And just approach me if you have any kind of questions that come up and that we cannot cover during the webinar or during the Q&A later on towards the end of the session. Just quickly about Kelly OCG. Actually, I had introduced this, but we are a full-blown 360-degree HR outsourcing organization. So we focus on a lot of different technology topics. We focus on talent acquisition outsourcing, on managing independent contractors. We do executive search. We do a lot of consulting in the digital and technology space right now. So our core business is HR outsourcing. We do a lot of recruiting, and we use a lot of technology, and that's basically what I want to talk to you about today. And just to give you a rough agenda, what I will cover. I'm going to talk very, very briefly about recruitment technology and the evolution. So based on that, I'm going to talk a little about the drivers and trends in recruiting technology, how the landscape has changed, and what that means for organizations who want to keep up to the speed and really be best in class. I'm going to talk a little about the recruiting tech landscape and what kind of vendors and startups are working there. I brought some examples just to give you a quick overview what's actually happened out in the market. Later on, I'm going to talk about the typical recruitment challenges that we usually see within our customers' organizations from the Kelly OCG perspective, and how technology intelligently combined can help to solve them. Plus, because I always know that webinars with people matter, the attendees are always interested in live use cases. People want to see how that's actually done, how big organizations actually solve that challenges, and I brought some case studies and use cases so that you have a better understanding what that actually means in reality. What I'll talk about to you. Okay, so let me jump right in, and I want to talk a little about the evolution of technology in recruitment. And as I had mentioned a few minutes earlier, until the 1980s, it was in the majority of the economies very traditional, and it still is in a lot of economies today, where people would just move up or come up to the company, say, hey, do you have a job? They might do a test day to see if it's a fit, and then they get hired. Or they write a resume in school. I actually learned to write a resume or a CV by hand when I was in high school. And nowadays, all that changed. So since the beginning of the 80s, when the first PCs showed up, then ultimately you had in 1989 the arrival of the internet, which ultimately led to the first job boards in the 1990s, where you would apply on your job board and everything would start to go online. 2003, LinkedIn launched, which was a big step towards professional social networks. LinkedIn nowadays is very, very interesting for job seekers, but nearly 13 years ago that started. 2004, Indeed launched, which is a job board aggregator, which combines some kind of a Google for job search, so that changed the mechanics of the application. Again, 2007, you have the first iPhone, and I don't want to talk about the iPhone for recruitment, but what that actually meant was that now with a mobile device, with a smartphone, recruiting actually was possible on mobile, which was not the case before. And then now you had the chance to apply, or it started that you had the chance to apply through your mobile device. You could not only read emails, but also visit web pages. So that's basically the big push towards mobile application. In 2008, really marked the start of cloud technologies and cloud computing, when that really became popular. And I'm not only talking about cloud storage vendors like Dropbox or Google Drive, for example, which obviously is very important today as well, because a lot of applicants store their CVs and their data in the cloud. But it was also important for the companies and for the technology companies, because one of the big trends that you see today is cloud computing, where you do not necessarily have a lot of server space in your basement where you install your technology. Then a technician comes by from time to time and does the upgrades or kind of like fixes something, but it's more software as a service. And as a result, to combine that trends that I just mentioned, there are the four big recruiting technology trends that we see, and this is not new. We have not invented that, but I think it's always important to really understand what's happening on the market. And then I always talk of SMAC, which stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. And all recruitment or digital recruitment technology should somehow have capabilities that ideally cover all these four segments. So when you want to have an applicant tracking system to manage the applications in your company, it needs to have some kind of a social functionality so that you can share jobs on social media. People can apply maybe through your Facebook page. They can ask questions on Twitter or see your job postings on LinkedIn. I think that's one functionality that technology needs to have to be able to connect to these social channels. Mobile obviously is a topic that's very important, especially in the Asia region, where the amount of mobile phones is much bigger and much higher than the amount of laptop computers. So that today, as a best-in-class organization, you need to make sure that your applicants can access the jobs from their mobile device, but ideally also make sure that they can apply through their mobile device. And obviously the mechanic of the application is then totally differently, because they have to take a look on a small screen. So it has to be adjustable and responsive to the design. But also, what happens if you want them to upload a CV? Usually on your smartphone, there's not a big storing capability where you have your CV data stored, so it needs to have some kind of a cloud connection. The analytics piece is very, very important, because what we discuss with a lot of big organizations globally is data. It's a data-driven approach, so the tendency goes more towards analyzing the different outcomes and the different results of your recruiting efforts. And I think the least you need to have from a technology perspective is analytical capability that gives you relevant reporting, so that you understand what's actually happening with my applicants. How are they behaving? What are they doing? How many people come to my website, to my career website? How many people apply to the job posts? How many broke the process off? So this is something you want to analyze, and this has just started. I think the data-driven recruiting is one of the big trends that will continue to be very, very popular over the next years. And cloud is the last thing, and I'd already mentioned that a few minutes ago, where nowadays the trend obviously goes towards software as a service, which also from the technology perspective makes it much easier, because there are a lot of technologies where you just go to the website of the vendor, you sign up, you pay by credit card if you want to do that, and use the technology. And if after 3 months you don't need it anymore, you just cancel the contract or the subscription, and then you do something else. I think that's basically something that gives HR a lot of flexibility to combine different technology pieces together. So the next slide that you see here might look a little complex, but I always I've built that, and I take that with me when I talk to customers about different technology sets in recruiting. So what options do you have, and what should you look at when you are a talent acquisition organization and you want to upgrade your technological capabilities? And from my perspective, there are always three big areas of during the hiring process, and this is you need to source candidates, attract them to your organization or your jobs. Then on the second step, you want to interview them. You want to see, are they really a good match? Do they fit in the company? Do they have the skills and capabilities that we need so that we as an organization can be successful? And then ultimately, when the candidate has passed all the different steps, you need to make sure he is hired. And that also poses some challenges from time to time, but you can do a lot with technology today. So if you look at the bottom, actually the backbone of all your recruiting activities should always be the applicant tracking system, and I'm sure that many of you use that technology today already. the big thing that came up just, I think, like 5 years ago. It's what's called candidate relationship management technologies, or CRM. And the functionality is basically like a customer relationship management that you as an organization can use to track your customers and understand what kind of touch points do you have. And the reason the CRM topic became very, very big and will continue to be very, very big is that an applicant tracking system is usually a tool where you only have inbound traffic, which basically means that you have an applicant, he is applying to a job on, on a job board, and you have the data, and you can funnel the data through your organization, but it's not really designed to interact with the candidate, or say I have a certain group of people I want to group together, let's say IT experts or engineers or nurses, whatever, and then in a bulk action reach out to them. So the CRM part is much more about managing talent communities, reaching out to people and automating a lot of interactions, which the ATS cannot do. So if I look at the sourcing piece, and we discussed about the backbones, there are obviously a lot of topics you need to cover, a lot of bases you need to cover today as an organization, and you should start with multi-posting technology, which means that you can post jobs on all different websites, on all different job boards, on your social media channels, and usually do that, to avoid to do that manually, but have a technology. Social media presence is very, very important in a lot of countries today, because applicants want to learn more about your organization, and they go to your Facebook page to see what's working actually in your organization. They go to Glassdoor and to learn about what do actual employees actually say about your organization. Next topic, and I'll deep into it much deeper later on during the webinar, is active sourcing, and this is a big topic, especially in the U.S. and in Europe, where very often you do not have enough candidates who apply, so you need to headhunt your candidates, reach out, engage them in a dialogue, identify them, engage them in a dialogue, and then basically make sure they understand that you have a great job to offer, and you want to convince them to change their job and come and work for you. You need to also have different technologies to do that. Programmatic advertising, I'm going to talk about that a little later, but this is basically marketing capabilities or posting jobs on social media, and not just in the traditional manner, but targeting people and applying online marketing tactics. I think that's something, but I'll talk about that a little later. Employee referral is an important topic, and obviously talent communities are a different and important topic. So during the interview phase, when you really want to make sure that you get to know the candidate, a lot of technology nowadays revolves around generating efficiencies. So that's why very often automated interview scheduling is discussed when I talk with bigger organizations, and that basically means that the candidate can go to an online calendar and take a look at the available times that the recruiter might have for his interview. This is a huge thing if you hire several thousand people a year. This reduces a lot of complexity during the alignment process, so that the candidate then is much easier to find a slot without any human interaction. Next topic, video interview. I'll talk about that later as well, but this is what we see heavily growing all over the world, where you would try to avoid travel costs or telephone interviews, but instead have video interview where you have a better sense what the candidate can do. Last topic in this column, assessment diagnostics. We see a massive trend towards online assessments, where candidates take online tests that are designed by psychologists, as an example, to get a better insight how that candidate is thinking, what are his strengths, what are her weaknesses. That goes in that bucket. And then through the hiring process on the right side of the slide, you can automate a lot of topics. You can automate the onboarding where people enter certain data online and not through paper. You want to make sure that you engage people when they sign their contract but have not yet started. This is something that we implement as well with our customers. And also you can do a lot of the online induction training where you train people online so that they hit the ground running, as we say, and really have all the competence in now how they need to be successful in their job, maybe even before they start their job. Okay, so this was a complex slide, but let me just move on. What you've seen on the previous slide was basically the big overview on the landscape and what's happening there. So what I found interesting, and I've been in the business for 15 years, what I find very, very interesting that there are nowadays hundreds of thousands of vendors on the market. HR tech is one of the markets that's very attractive to venture capital. I just recently saw an article on People Matters about the Indian startup scene and how many great startups in the HR technology space are now coming out of India. And this didn't surprise me because this is a major thing. You see in the US, you see in Europe, you see in India, you see in Southeast Asia. So HR technology is very, very popular. And what's happening is that more and more companies go in that space, more and more startups offer solutions. And as an organization, you need to make sure that you have an understanding what kind of solutions these organizations are offering and how that fits in your overall recruiting technology strategy. And this is why, from an organizational perspective, you can understand that nowadays there not necessarily have to be a one-size-fits-all approach. And I'm going to talk about the challenges that we see within organizations in a few moments. But I just wanted to give you an overview on what the market looks like. And these are a lot of vendors, and this is like it's growing all the time. So from the strategic perspective, and I want to take a look at that slide for a moment. From the strategic perspective, it's important that you as an organization understand where do you want to go, because what I see three steps towards digital capabilities, and what you usually have in a lot of organizations is what I call low tech, high touch. So you really do a lot of the things manually. You work a lot with Excel. You work through email. You might have an applicant tracking system to manage your applicants, but in general, it's mainly a manual process. So a lot of organizations then at some point say, okay, we need to automate some topics through technology in the process, and we want to have maybe a more sophisticated delivery capability. And that's when the shared service centers come into play, which I understand is a very, very popular topic that I discuss with a lot of customers in India as well. And then you want to make sure that you have the right technology in place to be able to deliver on-site and off-site. And then the last thing, and this is what I see very often discussed in conferences right now, it's all tech, no touch. So that you have an end-to-end digitized process, you have a technology suite that then interacts with each other so that you have a data flow, and there's actually no human involvement. And, I mean, we can discuss that if that is good or if that is bad, but technologically it's possible, and I want to talk about that a little. So the next thing for me is as a talent acquisition organization or recruiting organization, we really need to make sure that we understand the different steps of the funnel and traditionally, organizations very much looked at the bottom of the funnel, where someone would actually apply to a job post. He would be an applicant, then became a candidate, would be interviewed, would be down selected, and then finally hired. So that's like what recruiting has looked for quite some time. The process was supported by applicant tracking systems technology, but in a lot of global countries, especially in the U.S. and in Europe, we see that it's not enough, and we also need to make sure that we fill the funnel. And really, I'm trying to understand how the candidate is behaving, and what can we do to fill the funnel. How can we analyze what's happening on our career pages? How can we understand how many touch points the candidate has with our organization? And that's basically what makes it tricky today, because it's not so much only about measuring the funnel anymore, but rather thinking about how can I attract people to apply to the jobs, because job boards very often are not enough. So I explained a little programmatic advertising, which is one of the hot topics right now, at least where I live. And the idea is, and Facebook is just an example, and the idea is that with social media, you have the ability to target candidates based on their interest. And there is always the saying, and you might have heard that Facebook knows you much better than your partner or your parents, just because they have a good understanding what you like, what you don't like, what you click, what you read, what you don't click. So, and that basically gives, from the recruiting perspective, a good opportunity to target audiences. And if you ever been to the ad manager of Facebook, I can only recommend to go there and really take a look at how you can target advertisement or audience for advertisement, because they have a very, very good targeting functionality. And this is one of the big things that comes up now, where you also try to target people that might be interesting for your job, and target them based on their background, on their college degree on Facebook, so that they get ads displayed. Just an example, you can do that through multiple other sources as well, or social media networks as well. But this was just an example I wanted to do because Facebook is very, very popular in India as well, and you really can fine tune and put together who should see my ad here. And for recruiting and employer branding, this is a very, very powerful tool that you can use. Next thing, and just also an example, moving further down the funnel, what we find in a lot of economies is the widespread of mobile technology. I just explained that a few minutes ago. And when you move to the U.S. and to Europe, for example, when you have the younger generation, they basically grow up with mobile technology. So it's not necessarily that they spend a lot of time on their laptop or on their traditional PC. They might do that, but most of the time you see the teenagers running around with their smartphones. So as a recruiting organization, if you want to target that specific group, being able to offer mobile application technology, or including that in your process, might be helpful. So there are many things from providing QR codes to applying by SMS, by text message, or through Messenger. And I would encourage you to take a look into that, because for certain target groups, this is really a good solution and drives a lot of traffic and a lot of candidate traffic. One other example, and you'll understand later why I jumped from technology to technology, but one of the other things that I've just recently started to look into more deeply is semantic text analysis. And that's basically technology that is capable, or technology that's capable to understand the written sentence or the context of text. And there are a lot of vendors, and I just listed a few. There are much more, but there are vendors who are able to to parse, so that means read CV data into your database, and then also look for certain traits. So if you want to filter people who just got A grades in high school or in college, you can do that, because the technology not only stores the data, but also understands the data up to a certain point. This is fairly early on the market, but nevertheless, this is a big thing right now, and I think we're going to see much more movement there. But basically, it's possible that you have technology that understands the CV data and can interpret, so to speak, the content of the CV. Let me move on and talk a little about online assessments, moving further down the funnel that I showed you before. Another big thing we're discussing with a lot of customers right now are online assessments, where people take an online test. You learn more about their character traits. You can learn, are they able to handle stress? You can learn what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, if they can interact well with other people in your organization. And this is basically the big driver for that is that in the past you very often had interviews. You might have had behavior-based interviews, but the general idea was that you would have a discussion between a recruiter and the candidate. And obviously, what you want to do as an organization, you want to exclude unconscious bias. And that's why we see a massive trend to rate candidates, to test candidates in a structured way, so that all the candidates have the same testing, and then ultimately the results can be compared based on the technology. And that even goes further. It's not only the online assessments, but a big trend technology-wise that we see is competency-based assessment. So this is a screenshot example of a video interview that's testing someone in engineering that has to try to solve a live coding challenge here in that. And I think this is something that we see as well from Kelly OCG, where companies want to learn much more about the capabilities, and you can do that through technology. You can do that online, and this is very, very cost efficient, just as an example. Video interviewing, I just mentioned previously, this is one of the big things I've seen. I was just in Chicago a few weeks back for the Global HR Technology Conference, and there were a lot of video interviewing vendors. And video interviewing has really become very, very big for the last 5 years. And this is much more than just Skype in a branded portal, but because it gives you a lot of capabilities to rate. You can collaborate with colleagues to take a look at the videos. Candidates can do self-service interviews where they click a link and then take the interview anytime they want. From the recruiting perspective, this can be very efficient. If you want to screen a lot of candidates, this can be a very, very efficient way to do that because you don't have to do face-to-face meetings, but also have more input than just a phone interview, because you see the candidate, you see how he reacts to questions, you can see how he's looking. Is he smiling? Is he positive? And that's one of the things that was not there a few years ago. Automated interview scheduling, I briefly discussed, and I actually didn't think much of that technology until recently. I had a workshop with a big Fortune 500 company, and I talked to the head of the recruiting department. I said, quite frankly, what's your biggest challenge? So what keeps you up at night? What's the biggest inefficiency in your program? And he said, well, quite frankly, the thing that gives me the most pain is the interview scheduling, because the department head calls my recruiting assistant, says, hey, I want to see the candidate Tuesday at 4. And then the assistant calls the candidate and says, hey, can you do Tuesday at 4? And the candidate says, oh, that's bad, but I can do Wednesday at 5. So it's going back and forth, and there's a lot of inefficiency. So that's why I'm a big advocate of automated interview scheduling. And that's basically an approach like you might know if you, I don't know, schedule something with a dentist or buy tickets for the cinema. A lot of things you can schedule online nowadays. And my thinking is always, why should you not do that through with the recruiting process? And just another screenshot here. Actually, it's self-serve so that the candidate can select his own slot, and it automatically connects with the calendar of the recruiter, so that the schedule is filled up. Just as an example. Before I jump into the live examples and come towards the end of the webinar, I want to just briefly talk about chatbots. There's been a lot of buzz about artificial intelligence, about chatbots. And I'm taking a look at that right now, and I think there's a lot of movements. I read a lot about artificial intelligence in recruiting these days. But what I really see right now is just basic chatbot functionality, where you would have let's say a chatbot for I don't know, Facebook Messenger, just as an example, and then if you ask questions, this technology pulls predefined answers and answers that, and then when you have a question that's outside that answer pool, usually says, oh, I need to check, I'll be right back, and someone will talk to you. But I think the big thing for the future as these technologies emerges is that you have a great opportunity to weave that into a recruiting process, and then answer pre-screen questions, answer standard questions, and reduce the human interaction without the candidate knowing that. So just as an example, if you look at any given Facebook career page of a big company, a lot of the questions are, hey, do you offer jobs in that field? Do you hire in that city? What kind of programs do you have for graduates? So let's say 95% or 90% of the questions repeat themselves, and a lot of people ask that. So I think that's a big thing to automate, good chance to automate things, but we'll see where the technology goes, and I think we're far from artificial intelligence in that space, even though a lot of vendors try to sell that. Okay, just very briefly and very quickly about social media. One of the big things you can do right now is buy social media data, and a lot of through aggregators, and a lot of technology vendors use that. They buy a huge amount of data, and based on that, have a better understanding of how candidates behave, how candidates move in the social web, and actually also identify data you can use during your recruiting process through their tool. I'm going to give you an example of that in a few minutes. Okay. So the social media piece is very, very important, because what a lot of organizations struggle with is to attract talent and to find talent outside of LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is very traditional. You want to find someone, you look for the right keywords, you do some Boolean search, you find the people, you send them an email, and ideally someone comes back and applies. Very often that's not working anymore, because a lot of, for example, engineers, they don't like to be on LinkedIn, because they are flooded with a lot of different headhunters approaching them. So it's not so easy for you to identify them. And what's happening is that best-in-class successful organizations go outside of LinkedIn and take a look at where is that talent? Are they active on Stack Overflow? Are they active on GitHub? Where are these people? And this basically, a lot of candidates you can find outside, but as a recruiting organization, that's very tricky, because you need to have the right technology to do that. And this is just another example. This is a social data search engine called Talent Wonder. It's a startup from Germany that we use. It's Kelly OCG as an example, that combines different social media channels in one interface, so that you basically have some kind of a Google for talent approach. Just in this example, ask for Java developer. Obviously, you can dig much deeper, but it gives you then a consolidated view on candidates, combines all their different social media channels that the technology, which by the way is powered by Watson technology of IBM, that the technology found in the internet, and gives you a much better overview how to approach that candidate outside of LinkedIn. And I think this is like the next big thing where it's easier than ever to find people in the internet nowadays. Okay. So let me walk you through the typical 4 challenges that we see right now in talent acquisition, and I'm going to speed up a little so that we have time for the Q&A. But the 4 typical challenges we see in organizations right now are these that you see on the screen. And let me start on the top of the left, low applicant flow. This basically means that it's not necessarily that you want to hire a high amount of people, but basically just not enough people apply to your job app. So it's not rocket science. You don't want to hire really scarce talent, but basically people maybe don't find your job ad. They basically don't know that you're there. They're not applying, and you do not get enough candidates. This is the one challenge that we have, that we see. So on the top of the right, you have difficult to fill hiring, which is when you have talent scarcity in the area where your company is. You want to hire a certain skill set of engineers or developers or specialists that usually don't apply because they are in jobs. They not necessarily look at job boards, so you have to approach them. That's what fits in that bucket. If you look at the bottom of the left, you have high applicant volume. You have a job, 500 people apply. How can you do that, and how can you screen in a very efficient way? And then on the bottom of the right, you have high volume hiring, which means that you want to fill 1,000 jobs. How do you do that in a most efficient way? Okay, let's start here with the low applicant flow. And the case study that I have here is it's a live example of a luxury brand retail chain that the project I did in Germany, and you wanted to target younger candidates or salespeople with an affinity to fashion and popular brands. So the challenge for us was we had 4 weeks before launch, 30% of the positions were not filled because not enough candidates applied. And what we did to solve that problem was we used demographic and location data to identify neighborhoods in the city, and then use a apply by text campaign. I'm speeding it up because people might just tell me that there are a lot of questions and we want to make sure we answer all of them. So just to give you a better understanding, red dot is a beautiful city of Düsseldorf in Germany, and the orange dot you see there is basically the location of the store. This is where we wanted to hire. So we didn't have enough candidates. So what we did is work with a service provider that have demographic and location data, and that would tell us that in these areas that are highlighted by the green boxes, this is the areas your target group most likely lives in Düsseldorf. Because it's the right time, the right age span, the right income. I mean, all this data is available. What we did was then we printed flyers. This is just an example here where people could kind of like use the QR code or apply by text, and we just had a service provider then put it in the different post boxes. So result of that topic was that people actually applied, and we were able to fill the jobs. And how the technology played together was that we would have the flyer or the mailings and put in the post boxes of the neighborhoods. People would apply through text or the QR code. Data would go into the CRM, the Candidate Relationship Management System. We would send them automated without human interaction, an email with the automated scheduling approach. The candidate could book the slot with a recruiter, and then we would immediately have the recruiting process started without pre-screening. That's just one example where we put different technologies together to solve that specific problem. So let me move on to the next bucket. To give you an example on that, and it was about high applicant volume, and this is also live project that we did at Kelly OCG. It was with a car manufacturer, and what they do is they have a management trainee program in the corporate headquarters, very, very popular. They want to hire young graduates with excellent grades, because the program is some kind of a fast track program to higher management. So for 10 open positions, 3,500 people applied. And basically what we did, we used automated CV screening through the semantic text analysis that I had just mentioned a few minutes ago. We used online assessments, used video interviewing to pre-select or pre-screen candidates, but then ultimately also did the automated interview scheduling, so that we had a lot of interaction without human interaction before the recruiter would actually speak to the candidates. So the process flow, people would apply through the applicant tracking system. We then would analyze through technology the CV data and do some matching, who fits, who does not fit. We would invite the candidates to an online assessment. They take the assessment. If they passed a certain score, they would move to the next stage, to a video interviewing. And then ideally, the candidates that made it so far through the process then could book their own interview and then ultimately be interviewed by the recruiter. So I'm speeding up because I'm ahead of time and we have a lot of questions. Let me talk quickly about difficult to fill hiring. Third case study here, consulting company that wanted to hire very, very specific or very niche skilled tax advisors, a lot of experience in that specific field. And in the country we were doing the search, we would only find 50 people on LinkedIn. So it was very, very clear that we needed to go outside of LinkedIn. And we used Talent Wonder, the sourcing engine that I had just showed you, to identify people outside of LinkedIn in niche groups for tax advisors, just as an example. The process here was, again, a little different with another technology, but it was set up to tackle that specific problem. So we would identify the potential candidates through social search, import them into the CRM, then enrich the data so that we have more information how to approach them. So do we find an email address? Do we find a telephone number? Do we find a Twitter handle where we could IM the candidate or DM the candidate in that space? Approach the passive candidate, told them about the big chances and the great job opportunities at the customer's organization, and then ideally interview. So that was like another challenge, another technology, and now I'm going to the last one, high volume hiring. Typical topic that we see very, very often. We wanted to hire for a call center company towards the end of the year. They wanted to hire 1,000 people for seasonal peak. The target group was not really specific. The only knockout criteria was that people could work on the weekends or in the evenings, do shifts. And obviously have a clear speech, so that would be the people could understand them on the telephone. And the challenge was we needed to screen between 10,000 and 15,000 candidates. And the solution for us was to have a fully automated workflow that included text messaging, phone screening, and automated interview scheduling. And how that actually looked was that people would apply. We would have a data integration into the CRM, so we can interact with the candidates. We would send the candidates knockout questions, and that basically means that we would ask them, hey, can you work weekends? Can you work in the evenings? And if they say no, then they wouldn't match. So we would know that we wouldn't have to talk to them or interview them because they wouldn't fit the requirement. We would have an automated voice screening solution, which basically means that the interviewer or the recruiter could check if the candidate is able to speak clearly and can be understood. And then, as in the other processes, we would ultimately then interview the remaining candidates. And this is a good example how you can automate a lot of topics on the top of the funnel and then ultimately make sure the recruiters only interact with the candidates that can be a potentially good fit. So that was fast-paced. I'm 5 minutes over the time, and so we have 10 more minutes for questions now.
Right. Thank you so much, Tim, for the great insights. I'm sure the audience has taken in all the information you have shared with all of us. We will now be moving on to the questions posted by our listeners. We have a lot of questions pouring in from the participants. So let's go on to the first question from Tumpa. How reliable is the social recruitment strategy, given the fact that a lot of people tend to fake information on social networks?
That is an excellent question, and so my position on that is that social media or social recruiting is good to initially find people, and obviously if you want to hire an engineer and someone is actually a baker or a nurse and says he or she is an engineer, obviously then you have a problem. But what I always think about social recruiting is it's not that you hire someone just out of looking at the LinkedIn profile or just out of looking at the identity or the information that someone provides in social media. It's one way to identify people and to interact with people. So even if you if you have a passive candidate, even then you want to make sure you have the relevant screening and you want to take a look at the CV and you want to maybe have a reference call with a previous employer. So it's not that just the LinkedIn profile does not replace the CV, but I think it's a good way to find if there's an initial match. The candidate needs to go through the entire process. So I see the problem. I think it's a challenge. That's right. But I do not think that just using LinkedIn will anytime soon replace the normal screening and interview and background screening process.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim, for answering that question. The next one is coming from Amit. How can we reduce the gap in candidate engagement?
I think that the candidate engagement thing is very, very important now, and I totally agree. I think there's a big gap now, and I think that technology also is a big danger to candidate engagement because just to give you an example, there are in many countries, and I'm actually not sure if something like this exists in India, but in many countries there is a big tendency towards very easy mobile applications. You know, like one of the things you discuss is Tinder for jobs, so to speak. So where you just swipe and apply for the job. And then a lot of organizations are very, very unhappy with that because it's too easy for candidates to apply. So and therefore the engagement is not really high. And then you call the candidate and the candidate says, oh, well, really, did I apply? Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. So I think one of the things you want to make sure as a talent acquisition or recruiting organization is that you are open and transparent on what you're doing. And I think you need to be fast. I think the candidate engagement is important today, and you can solve that when you're really fast, when you're really open, and when you don't leave the candidate in the dark. And I think by that you have the chance to demonstrate that you're an excellent organization, that you're a good organization, you keep up to your promises, and I think this is like one solution to that challenge. But ultimately, when you have talent scarcity and you want to fight for a niche skill set or for good talent, you really need to be more of a partner or recruitment partner and career counseling partner than just a transactional recruiter. That would be my answer. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, Tim. So here's one from Uttara. It's a very general question from her. How to get the right candidates to apply for the job?
That's an excellent question, and I've been discussing that question for for 15 years because there are people that say, hey, we want to. If you write down a job description for a job board, we want to narrow it as much as possible so that only the right people apply. And then there are other people who say, no, we want to lower the bar. We rather have more applicants and then beat out the people who cannot do the job. But my overall comment to that people is to that question is you need to make sure through marketing and employer branding that you are or people perceive you to be an attractive employer for that specific skill set. So if you want to hire, just an example I make up, if you are a company and you have a good product where you need special engineers, you want to make sure that engineers in that area know that you are a good employer, and that it makes sense for them to apply and work for your organization if they want to grow their own capabilities. I know that's hard when you have a shared service center and you want to hire associates who sit on the telephone. That's not so easy. That's right. But I think it's always very clear to be very direct in the job description and be very open and transparent. What do you want? What do you need as an employer? And do that. And then the other thing is obviously, I think more and more also in the entire Asian region, I think active sourcing is the really big thing. There has been on the market for some time where you look for the people who can do the job and who would fit based on the available data, and then reach out. I think this is something where the recruiter more and more becomes a hunter instead of a farmer.
Sure. I hope that has answered Uttara's question. Moving on to the next question from Amit. Is Facebook changing the way of recruitment in recent trend, or will it be impacting the recruitment industry?
That's an excellent question as well, and I think it will change, and I think it will impact because what's happening is that more and more people are on Facebook, and based on what I explained with the programmatic advertisement, it's as a recruiting tool, it's very good because you can target candidates very, very directly or very specifically, and there are a lot of vendors in that space who focus on Facebook. There is a company called Work4 out of the US who offer job board functionalities on Facebook and job ads on Facebook. So I think this is going to be a big thing in the topic. I'm not saying that it will replace all the other job search channels that we have, because I think in general the internet will become the job board more and more, and not just one specific channel. But I think my strong recommendation, especially for India, because I understand that Facebook is very strong in India as well, my recommendation would be to take a look into it and include that in your technology landscape and in your strategy, because the younger generation is obviously more active than the older generation, but if you start today, you might have a competitive advantage in 4 to 5 years in your market.
Right, Tim. Thanks for answering that. Let's move on to the next question from Nazia. It's a pretty lengthy question, so let me just be a little slightly slow with that. How will the data or social media help a startup company who do not have much budget to spend on cloud or social marketer to gauge the genuine candidate interest and keep the candidate enthusiastic to take the offer and decrease the decline with comparison to big competitors?
That's an excellent question. It's all excellent questions. I'm always really impressed how educated the people matter audience is. So just to get that, I think social media, as a startup, social media gives you a great opportunity to compete against competitors, and not so much by spending more budget or more advertising money, but by showing how cool it is to work in your organization. So I always encourage companies to to use Facebook or social media to grant a look behind the curtain. That's how I call that. So to really showcase how is working in your organization like. Do you do parties after jobs? Are you a young team? Do you have a nice environment? Do you have a cook-off once a month? You know, like something like that. And the good thing about social media is about authenticity. So it's not so much about spending big marketing bucks, but rather about showcasing how the culture is. And as a startup company, I would always focus on the culture. There's the old Peter Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I still like that, even though it's a very, very old quote. But I think as a startup, that's the really cool thing, because you're not one of 5,000 people in a big office building. You're an individual in that startup. So I think this is an excellent thing to do something without a big budget. Just to make it short, because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you, Tim, for answering that. As the time does not permit, we will, take all the questions which we still have. We'll take it offline, and you can answer them and share with all of them, all the participants. So with this, we will be wrapping up today's webinar, and once again, we'd like to thank today's webinar partner, Kelly OCG. Also, our special thanks to our speaker, Tim, for this webinar and indispensable information that he has shared with us, with all of us. And I'd like to thank everybody in the webinar audience for participating in today's presentation. We will be coming back to you with many more such interesting sessions. So that will conclude today's webinar. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.